Lawyer from Lennox Head to talk to you now briefly, and she went with Lucy Haslam to Canberra recently, met politicians, which was interesting. I think Jackie Lambie was sympathetic, but the one who's actually helped her the most is Pauline Hanson. Anyway, interesting, isn't it? So just while we're waiting for Sally to come, and then Dr. Catalaris will talk after her, I've been in Nimbin 30 years, and probably half the population uses cannabis a bit. Probably nearly everybody here has used it, so there's a generally good understanding and sympathy for it. And I could tell you, after sort of 40, nearly 50 years of using cannabis, my big conclusion on the whole thing is that really the whole drug war, is all about people making profit out of our pain. And in fact, I think all drug use is a health issue. Anyone, no matter what, people who are hooked up on ice, they're all just trying to feel better, feel good, have less pain, have a good day. And the sooner we get to accept that and not judge people and have this criminal thing happening, the sooner we'll get over a lot of troubles, I reckon, because right now they're building the biggest jail in Australia down the road at Grafton right now. Brand new jail, all computerised, and I can guarantee you, like the Hilton, they need to keep it full. It'll all be worked on a business thing of keeping it full. It's pretty sad, and in Nimbin, maybe because we've got that druggy name, but we're the last bus stop for a lot of people. A lot of people come here who have got rejected from their own community or don't know how to work it out or end up homeless and know they'll get a free joint in Nimbin, which is a bit of pain relief and a bit of escape, if you like, for a while. So it's a really compassionate little village. It's interesting, but it's got a lot of tough cases. A lot of really sick people come here. We're quite an outdoor hospital. It's interesting. There's 9 permanent police in Nimbin. The whole one street is live to the cop shop. And we've got a sergeant, a female sergeant, who's a long-distance runner who is really going for ambition. She is so keen on hunting everyone. I move this? Anyway, it's kind of, when you live here, it's ridiculous. We have groups of 3 or 4 police walking the street all the time, searching people, regularly arresting people. I feel for the cops a bit because they're in a bind. Ice is in the same category as cannabis for them. It's just all illegal. And the fact they can't choose is tragic. So for me, and we have the hemp party based here, we really reckon legalising or decriminalising cannabis possibly the best thing you could do for a lot of people with other drug habits. The Hemp Embassy has people who are alcoholics and ice users all working there now, and they just smoke pot. So people say it's a gateway drug, but it's a gateway drug out of other drugs a lot, I can tell you. Here's Sally McPherson, who has talked here before at a Medican and recently went to Canberra with Lucy Haslam. Some of you will know Lucy, who's an outspoken campaigner for cannabis law reform from Tamworth. So Sally, I hope, is going to talk a bit about that trip and your new friendship with Pauline Hanson, and not to worry about getting busted too much.
That's right.
Sally, thanks for coming, Sal.
Thank you, Michael. So, I'm Sally McPherson. I have a particular interest in the law and medicinal cannabis users in particularly. Into the mic, sorry. So in short, I was privileged to go to Canberra with Lucy Haslam and Teresa Nicoletti and Lee Donnellan. Lee Donnellan's recently been, well, not so recently, but earlier this year was charged for cultivating 17 plants, which he didn't have. He only had 6, but putting that to one side, the background of it is, and why I'm running this pro bono for him, because it's outrageous. Lee is a returned serviceman from Afghanistan. He came back with chronic PTSD unable to work. He'll probably never work again. He has a young family. He was originally prescribed a myriad, 12, 13, 14 meds to deal with each of the symptoms of the PTSD. Over time, that was whittled down to one prescription for cannabis. And that prescription allows him to smoke buds, floss, via a vape. So Lee, being a returned vet, asked for Department of Veterans Services, Veterans Affairs, to pay for the script, and they refused. We're not paying for weed. This man's really unwell, like even just first meeting. He's in one of these movies that's around High as Mike, I think. Anyway, even just first meeting, he just has that sort of withdrawn quality of eye contact and a nervy kind of quality to him. He's just clearly unwell. Anyway, Department of Veterans Affairs said, we're not paying for that. So Lee was in the unenviable position of having to pay $1,100 a month for his script. Now, bearing in mind he's been prescribed bud, so we all know how accessible that is and how inexpensive it is compared to $1,100 a month. But because veterans, and Lee's unemployed, as I said, so Veterans Affairs wouldn't pay for it. So Lee exhausted all his savings before turning around and growing a few plants. In their infinite wisdom, Queensland Police raided, seized the plants, charged him with multiple offences, including the cultivate and being in possession of implements to ingest cannabis. So there's like 5 charges. We initially, I guess, the issue therefore for Lucy Haslam and why we went to Canberra, and because Lee's situation captures it so well, is really about 2 things: patient access and the cost of lawfully prescribed cannabis. $1,100 a month when you're not working and you have a young family is just outrageous. We made representations to Queensland Police saying, look, it's really not in the public interest to prosecute this man. The Department of Veterans Affairs, and this is worth knowing if you know anyone in any kind of similar situation, but the Department of Veterans Affairs have now conceded and will now pay for, subsidise the filling of his scripts. So this was just an interim period between when he was lawfully prescribed and when DVA were willing to pay for it. And that's when he was growing. This man is suicidal. This man had been taken off a dozen meds. This man was reliant solely on cannabis and he couldn't afford it in that period. Anyway, Queensland Police are continuing to prosecute, and right here, right now, we had another mention last week or week before in Townsville Magistrates Court, and we're still proceeding at this stage because they refuse to withdraw the charges. And in amongst all this, they've seized what they're calling hash. I was dying to see the drug certificates come back because, of course, it's not hash. It was the after vape burn that I guess, and I haven't seen it, but presents as kind of something that looks like hash, So, of course, we're going to have to massage that charge a little bit because they obviously don't have the evidence to establish that. So the trip to Canberra was fantastic that Lucy organised, but that was the thrust of it, patient access and cost. So today, Michael asked me to talk to you about some of the things I discovered in this trip to Canberra, and there's a couple of things. Firstly, I hadn't realised, have any of you seen those graphs that show, wow, hurrah, look at patient access numbers growing, lawfully prescribed users, and there's these graphs, and I should have been together enough to bring one, but they're sort of showing that we've now got 5,000 odd lawfully prescribed users in Australia, and isn't that fantastic? Well, what I hadn't realised is that those graphs, they include repeat prescriptions, they include people who have been prescribed something and it's been ineffective, so they've got another script for a similar product, cannabis product. So they're included in that graph, and they're including, of course, people who have been scripted but can't afford to get the script filled at these $1,000 a month outrageous expense. So that was the thrust, was to say to Canberra, thanks for your 2016 Medicinal Cannabis Access Act. That was great, good start, but now no one can afford it if they can get through all the hurdles, and there's medical practitioners here who can tell you a lot more about those hurdles. The other thing, and that was where what Michael started to say was, I have to give credit where it's due. Pauline Hanson has been, without doubt, the most helpful and the most vocal as a result of our trip to Canberra. She is the one who has then gone about writing letters in Queensland. I don't want to give too much, I won't say exactly who and where, but suffice to say she's written to some people in Queensland saying, what the hell's going on with this? And had a response. So I just want to say, like, I never thought I'd really see the day when I say 3 cheers to Pauline Hanson, but, you know, credit where credit's due, she's really on board with this and gets it. Similarly, Jackie Lambie is fantastic about it. We spoke to her. Of course, her the thrust of her concern was the DVA delay in recognising that somebody from had gone from 13 meds down to bud. But she was quite helpful. Richard De Natale, he was helpful. I'm supportive of De Natale, but I must say it became a bit of a press conference moment for Richard De Natale, who got Lee and Lucy Haslam in front of a Prime 7 camera crew. But suffice to say, you know, they're certainly on board, the Greens, so I was grateful. But then we had other brilliant surprises. You know, the need for medical cannabis is everywhere. We had advisors for other ministers who would come along to the Senate room we were sitting in. One of them cried and couldn't stop crying as he talked about a family member and her condition and how he'd love to get access for this person to medical cannabis. And this was a senior advisor to another very conservative senator. So Andrew Wilkie came along, he was supportive. Are you guys interested in this, about which particular politicians? So, yeah, Wilkie came, he was supportive. Not one single Liberal Party member turned up. Not one. And naturally, Greg Hunt was specifically invited more than once. And he, strategically or not, call me paranoid, I don't know, but as we were literally leaving Parliament House, I mean, we're actually handing back our security passes, and Greg Hunt texted the group and said, oh, well, we can send somebody, one of the advisors or somebody from the office along now, knowing that we were physically walking out of the building. But so it was just interesting that not a single Liberal or Conservative person came. We had a staffer from Albanese's office. We had, interestingly, Shane Newman came. Sorry, I forgot my glasses today, so I need to hold this in Lismore in order to read it. Malcolm Roberts sent an advisor. Again, One Nation. They're just really behind it and supportive. So I did say to Pauline's office I'd give a shout out to her because, you know, they deserve it in this space. Oh, you legend. Thank you so much. Thank you. See how we go. Oh, yeah, much better. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just at that age where I have to keep trying to remember them. It's not automatic. Warren Edge came. That was an interesting twist, actually. He was more curious than supportive about what was going on. So there was, I won't go through everybody because there was also Deb O'Neill. Does anyone know who Deb O'Neill is, by the way? Yeah. Who is she? Sorry, National Party? A naturopath. But she turned up for this discussion, again, more curious than supportive, but that's okay, that's all good, healthy curiosity. We're not particularly impressed by Chris Bowen's perspective on it, but he was there. Anyway, so in short, look, the message that's trying to get to Canberra is make it easier to access, stop with your bullshit 5,000 numbers reflecting repeat prescriptions and people who can't afford to get it filled and people who are trying different products. Make it easier to access and make it cheaper. That's the essence of the current message that really needs to be sent to Canberra. I'm speaking to you today because Michael asked me to talk to you about that. But I will get onto a bit of law, if that's okay, in a second. Just on closing on that, though, is Di Natale's calling for some kind of amnesty as well for people who have been convicted. I'm not sure how this would work in practical terms, but a kind of amnesty for people who have been convicted but have been using cannabis for medicinal purposes. So I guess we all need to watch that space. Because I'm not quite sure how you're going to revoke these convictions when people have been losing their jobs over it. I mean, I've got clients who work in aged care and all kinds of fields and working with children who can't work in those fields anymore because they've got a drug conviction for using medicinal cannabis. And that brings me, I guess, into something I would like anyone in the room to tell me why this wouldn't work, and I implore you to. In fact, when Michael said, do you want to speak at Medican, I said, yeah, because there's one thing I really want to ask a room full of people. As a practitioner, I see there's two sections of the Act. I'll be very brief. But the Road Transport Act says under Section 111, if you drive with a trace of cannabis in an oral fluid sample, you'll be charged and convicted. 112 says if you're driving under the influence of a drug, you'll be charged and convicted. They're two very different defences, and I hate the expression drug driving for people who are merely driving with a trace of cannabis in an oral fluid sample. Smoke a joint yesterday, drive today, don't tell me I was drug driving, right? Because I wasn't under the influence. We all know that. So this is just me alone with my thoughts, but what I've been tossing around, the idea is that police, when they test you, it's a 3-stage test. You have the side of the road test, the liquor prize test, as it's colloquially called, lick the paddle pop stick. Then you have the second test, the Dragar 5000 test, which is either in the bus or back at the police station. And then the sample is sent down to FAS, which is the Forensics Analysis and Science people in Sydney, in Lidcombe. It's that test that results in the charge being laid. So in May, the laws changed, low-range drink drivers and Section 111. Everyone understand why I use that instead of drug driving now? So Section 111 offenders and low-range drink drivers, automatic 3 months off the road. Well, if it's a Section 111, obviously low range, you're taken off the road for 3 months straight away on the spot. But for the Section 111, they take you off the road for 24 hours, and then you're allowed to drive until the results come back from FAS, and then you're taken off the road for 3 months automatically, which is a problem for medicinal cannabis users because they don't sort of get to ventilate in court. Wait a second. Assuming that there's some value-laden judgment here about recreational pot smoking, I wasn't even doing that, it was medicinal, and they're not even getting the opportunity to make submissions to the court to say it was purely medicinal. At the moment, the police are testing for 5 nanograms, which I believe is 1,000 millionth. So that's 1,000 over 1 million. They're testing for 5 nanograms in a saliva sample, okay, which is why so many people are being found, the test is positive days later because it's such a small amount. And they are convicting people at 10 nanograms. So they'll test for 5, that'll pull you off the road, but you'll get your charge and conviction at 10 nanograms. Still just a micro dose. Andrew Catalaris would know more about 1,000 millionths of a gram than me. But so let me ask you, a room full of interested people, my personal solution, I can't see why this wouldn't work, is that certainly as an interim stopgap measure when it comes to medicinal cannabis users, lawfully or not prescribed, why couldn't we just let the police keep all their 60,000 test units? They're going to do 200,000 tests this year, or next year in New South Wales alone. There'll be 200,000 mobile drug tests conducted. Keep your testing kits, keep your Dragar 5000. You don't have to spend any money on this idea. Send the tests down to FAS, all cool. But why not just increase the level at which you prosecute to 200 nanograms. I don't know, I'm making up a number because I'm not a scientist. But instead of prosecuting at 10, what about if people who are lawfully prescribed and or people who are using cannabis for medicinal purposes were only charged at a much higher reading? We would prefer impairment testing, absolutely. But this may also loop in. Maybe the magic number at which you're prosecuted is the level of impairment. I don't know, but it just seems to me such a tidy way to say to police, not asking you to spend a dime. Keep your testing kits, knock yourselves out, 200,000 tests, go crazy. If that, you know, in this awful period that we're in right now, is Section 111 existing at all. But how about this idea that instead of convicting and prosecuting at 10 nanograms, you prosecute at 500 or 300, whatever the level of impairment is? I'm just putting that out there because I just thought of that one day when I was thinking and thought this would be a tidy way to resolve it. And I invite you to think about it, process it, and hopefully somebody with authority is going to be standing for Parliament and they might use that as a test. What's going on in Victoria, Andrew? Do you remember what Fiona Patton's bill? That's, I think, a complete defence, yeah. So in New South Wales, if you're lawfully prescribed, it is a complete and statutory defence that if you are lawfully prescribed and you're caught in possession of cannabis or what you're prescribed, that's a complete defence. Okay, but you won't be prosecuted, you won't be charged, you won't be convicted. It's a complete defence. Here's my script. But of course, that doesn't apply with driving, even though non-impaired. So this is to me, this is the biggest flaw we've got in the system right now, certainly with respect to medical cannabis users, putting aside massive issues like Lee Donnellan's. I don't have a lot more to add because I've spoken here before and I don't want to rehash what I've said before, but is there anybody who's got any specific questions that I might be able to help you with? Yes?
With the other tests, when they do the saliva test, is there a way, is it that they're picking up the oil? Is that what they're picking up? And if so, is there a way of getting rid of the oil from the saliva?
This is my expertise. So Nimbin, everyone is driving around with either a fisherman's friend on their dashboard or a big peppermint lolly or some fluid.
Chocolate milk.
Truckies love chocolate milk. I think it probably puts a coating on you. So it's horrible that it's a law we have so little respect for, but that's kind of what it's got down to. And
I've done all the research, Paul Stone.
And?
Anything orange juicy, Coca-Cola-y, anything acidy to cleanse your palate, anything chocolatey, iced coffee, anything fatty, or eating a sausage roll is probably another good example of this. Anything fatty to coat your palate, anything, cleanser-ish like...
in other words, the test is crappy.
Your palate or anything fatty to coat your palate, or it's probably not a good idea to smoke tobacco, but smoking a tobacco cigarette while you drive after you've had a joint is enough to coat your palate with all the other toxic shit that's in a cigarette too, so they don't get the horrible swipe from you.
Anyway, I hate to tell you, but Coke totally works. I don't want anyone drinking Coca-Cola, but it totally works. So this is the first test.
I refer to it as contraband in this town. And while I've got the floor, anyone driving a white Mitsubishi Outlander AZQ54H?
Is it parked just out there?
No, it's parked over the fire hydrant just outside the front gate.
Okay.
No? Okay, I'll look elsewhere.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Michael.
Is it a matter of just getting rid of that oil?
I can't say exactly, but I've been tested and busted. So what they do...
Something else.
I can tell you exactly how it works. So first, there's a little pad. You have to scrape your tongue and fill this pad. So if you've got some liquid, you can fill the pad easily. And then, if that comes up positive, you've got to get out of the car and they take you for another test. The catch is the second test gets sent to a lab for a third test. And that's what Sally was talking about. You know, anyone up down to 10 nanograms, that's 10 parts per billion, that is. I don't know what your maths was about.
1,000 over
10 parts per billion. So it's really minuscule. So anyone can come up, and I think that's why doctors are using isolates of CBD. It's the only thing guaranteed to be safe, because a tiny bit of THC can come up. But look, it's not that easy to get busted. Fiona Patten has put legislation into Victoria only a week ago for medical cannabis users to be exempt. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm sure it's going to change. But meanwhile, yeah, you have to be careful. Clean your teeth well. Did you tell them about capsules and the court case you want to run?
I was just about to. If that's
so the police expert in Lismore said if you have a capsule or a suppository, it won't register because it's the residue of smoke. So I'm not sure that's true.
Or edibles or smoke, she said. Dr. Pearl, who's from FAS, where the third test goes, she gave evidence before Magistrate Halpin, and she said edibles and ingesting weed by smoking it will show up in the oral fluid sample test, but a capsule and a suppository won't. And Magistrate Halpin, fantastic, made the point of how ridiculous it was and how it couldn't possibly be the legislature's intention that the mere mode of ingestion was going to impact on whether or not you were charged and convicted.
No one's tested that in court yet, but it will happen.
It will happen, and I can't wait, because with the defence is honest and reasonable mistake of fact or necessity. They're the only two defences we have for with that kind of offence. Won't get too technical or boring, but an honest and reasonable mistake of fact. What more reasonably held and honest belief could you have than if you had heard a police forensics PhD, Dr. Pearl, say capsules don't show up?
Now I can tell you I'll tell you one more story.
Are we running it?
So you talked about a safe level. I actually think that's difficult. Like someone smoking their first joint, I'm not going to get in a car with them. Someone who's used to smoking a joint every morning like I have for 50 years, I'm going to be safer with my morning medication, I reckon. So I smoked a joint here a few months ago, then I drove home, then I drove back into town, and then I stopped in the disability parking zone. It was a big mistake. I didn't get out of the car. Anyway, the cop tested me, and I pleaded not guilty. So then you get your result back. So my result was 1,250 nanograms. So it sounds terrible. It's like, 6.1 alcohol reading. Like I'd be dead. But if you're allowed 10 nanograms, and I had 1,250, you can see it's just a joke. So if you're a genuine user, you're going to have THC in your system for days.
Now, if I could just pick up, finally, this demarcation between lawfully prescribed users, if you're in possession, defence, statutory defence. The suggestion I'm making is with respect to driving and allowing police to keep their testing units. Fiona Patten's bill that she's put forward from the Reason Party in Victoria says it should be a complete defence if you're a lawfully prescribed user to a roadside drug test charge. That should be a complete defence. The only reason I'm coming back from that is anticipating the police saying, we've got millions invested in all of these testing kits. So that's why I'm saying, okay, keep your tests, knock yourself out, but let's get some different levels in place here.
Andrew's right, we need an impairment test.
That's right, but
it doesn't matter what drugs you're using. My father, he's 90 on a plethora of pharmaceuticals. We got to the roundabout and he stopped. Mike, I've forgotten where we're going. It's like he should be impairment tested, but the pharmaceuticals are all okay. So we need a proper impairment test. And, there's country in America, they're working frantically to work it out.
Yeah, I have seen one, a picture of some images of a breathalyzer for pot smokers for impairment.
We're done. Any other question for Sal quickly? I want to put Andrew on before we have a break and you're all worn out.
I've got one quick question.
Yes, sister.
If I've been prescribed medical cannabis and I've got my tincture and I've got my buds medically prescribed, Can I, if I'm in pain, vaporise in a park or in the main road of Nimbin, so to speak?
Yeah, you can, but you can't drive.
Repeat my question.
The question was, if I'm a lawfully prescribed user and let's say I'm vaping, bud, can I then smoke it in a public place? And the answer is, I don't know, I'm sorry, but I'll look it up.
My doctor said I could, as per medically prescribed. If I'm in pain, I could go to a park and vaporise if I'm in pain as per medical prescription, as long as there's no kids around. That's what I've been told by my doctor.
I think that's right, and you can't do it near a preschool or something like that. You've got to walk away.
But how's that going to work with festivals?
Well, if I'm in pain, I've got to take my medicine.
That's right. You walk into a festival with a couple of joints in your pocket and your prescription, and say, you can go away now, dog. Yeah, that'll be interesting.
But you can't drive.
But you can't drive.
No. So the driving thing's difficult, but I wouldn't panic about it. I did, when I got busted, I wrote a long letter to the magistrate, told her my reason, long-term medical cannabis user. She totally let me off. And that's happening a lot here. Although I think the rules are changed a bit now and it's going to be automatic. Then you can appeal it. The magistrates are sick of it. It's a police thing.
What if you've just got a letter from the doctor to say that...
Won't help.
You won't?
No, you're not allowed to drive. Not allowed to drive with THC in your system, full stop.
Does the legislation differ in Queensland to New South Wales on driving at all?
No, I think it's the only one. The only thing I know happening is the bill in Victoria, which hasn't been even debated yet. Anywhere else in Australia, you're not allowed to drive.
Is the level the same then at 10 nanograms?
You're not allowed to have technically any THC. So, I'm pretty sure they test you down to the 10 nanograms. Not 100%.
They test
but
at 5,
Queensland
I think,
doctors will.
and then prosecute at 10.
I think
As
so.
I understand it. Yeah, I don't practice a lot up there in this space, but... Yep.
You're not legally prescribed, but you're caught on the roadside and then charged. If you go to court, but you've got a diagnosis of a brain tumour, will that help in the case, or they'll just go, sorry, you're not legally...
Will totally help. Depends on the magistrate. They're at the mercy of different magistrates. Am I right? It will totally help, I think.
Yeah, that's where sentencing submissions come in, and that's where you say, look, there's some mitigating features or circumstances attached to this offending, and here's what it is. So I can see that I'm guilty of the offence because all the elements of the offence have been made out, but here is these mitigating features. So...
Hang on a second. Hang on a sec, Doug.
Sorry, there's...
Let's just hear this guy.
On you getting busted, you mentioned before if you drink Coca-Cola and eat some chocolate or something like that, you won't get detected.
Generally, it seems to just...
Would that have worked in your case? Did you just...
Yeah, I was a bit slow. Yeah.
And can I just say, this isn't legal advice. I just have to pop up and say that because seriously, you couldn't go across
hippie
the court.
advice. That's hippie
I'm
advice.
just saying you couldn't. Given that I told you the two defences are necessity or honest and reasonable mistake of fact, you couldn't say I was at Medican and Sally and Michael were saying drink Coke or chocolate milk.
Some hippie you don't know his name said drink Coke.
And some lawyer you don't know her name said a couple of anaesthesias or some apple cider vinegar. Sorry, Nick.
The roadside tests pick up THCA.
Yeah, technically they shouldn't, but like THCA, the moment you pick a plant, it starts drying and converting to THC a little bit, I think. So you're in touchy country.
If you pick it and juice it straight away.
Should be fine. Yeah.
And you can eat a whole plant that way and you shouldn't show up.
Yeah, eat it. I wouldn't even pick it. I would just eat it live. Beautiful.
Yep.
I tell you, raw cannabis is going to be the ultimate future, I think. You know, we'll be able to go to a market, there's a bunch of parsley and coriander and cannabis, that will be gold in your salad.
When you say prescribed medical cannabis, are you talking about mainstream cannabis or are you talking about the real stuff you guys do?
It's the same though. So if you're prescribed medical cannabis, you can get buds. They'll be coming from Canada, perfectly grown pharmaceutically, or you can get extracts, tinctures. It's all going to be similar.
But I thought you can't patent a plant.
You can't?
Patent a plant.
Well, it's prescribed medically now anyway, and that's the start.
I don't trust
Monsanto owns cannabis, they reckon, but so far we're all ignoring them. Really. So, yeah. One more question.
Good luck. Good luck doing that.
We would love you to do that. Thank you so much.
And say, well, these saliva testing laws are bullshit because they're not showing cannabis.
It'll cost you tens of thousands of dollars.
But then the law is nothing to do with impairment. The law is about having THC in your system. Full stop.
It's not during nullification a way that they could then look at that law and a jury could say, well, no, this is not a valid law in this case because it goes against the spirit of legislation.
Well,
We'll let Andrew...
I think we should...
Andrew's the one. Andrew's going to come up here now. He is the jury nullification guru. And so we got help.